Good afternoon and welcome to the webinar on the Competence Framework, looking at introducing the benefits of the new framework and also how to use the new framework. I'm Jill Hancock, I'm the Head of Professional Standards and Knowledge at APM, and we'll be talking through the Competence Framework this afternoon. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on the YouTube channel from tomorrow, and a link will be sent around to all participants as well, so you can re-listen to the webinar should you wish to, or forward it on to colleagues if they have an interest in the content as well. What we're going to be covering today is looking at why we needed to change the competence framework, the changes that have been made, and also how you can access and use the new competence framework to get the best benefits out of it. So why did we need to change? The current framework had not been reviewed or updated since 2008, so the first edition of the competence framework was produced a number of years ago, and we hadn't actually looked at it since 2008, so it needed a refresh in the content. The first edition only was relevant to project managers and not inclusive of other disciplines within the project management profession, so it didn't cover program management, portfolio management or PMO. So that was one of the reasons why we wanted to look at that, and also to bring it in line with the refreshed body of knowledge as well. We needed a resource that was fit for purpose for 21st century project professionals, to look at how that actually worked and what was needed within the project management arena with regards to the competencies and how those indicators are put together. We also wanted to create a platform where we could build a new proposition in line with our 2020 strategy vision to be in a world where all projects succeed. To make sure those projects are succeeding, we need to demonstrate and show what those competencies are with regards to delivering effective projects, programs and portfolios. In addition to that, we also wanted to respond to customer feedback. So having launched the first edition of the competence framework a while ago, we'd been gathering feedback from users of the framework as to how they were using it, how they were implementing it, and what changes we could make for the better to make it more effective in its use. So we wanted to respond to that customer feedback. In terms of the updates, we did some extensive research and consultation with regards to the content, so taking on board some of that customer feedback. That then informed a number of focus groups, telephone interviews, face-to-face meetings and an online survey. So we weren't just working on the feedback that we'd gathered over the years, but actually did some extensive research on how people were using the framework, and to inform the developments from there. We employed an independent research company to carry that research out. It's also key to note that actually the competence framework content has been developed by the profession for the profession. So the content itself has been informed by a number of different professionals in a number of different project management disciplines. That's project, program, portfolio management and also PMO roles as well. And it is very much a tool for the profession moving forwards. The research that we did confirmed the need to extend beyond project managers, and the new competence framework does include project management competencies, program management competencies, portfolio management competencies and also those for PMO roles as well. So that's one of the changes that have been made. And the new framework also needed to recognise differences in job role or project complexity. So one of the things that we were looking at when we developed the competence framework is whether or not we would have separate competence frameworks for project, program, portfolio and PMO, or whether it's going to be one base framework that then the different competencies from there could be used to be applied to the different roles. What actually came out from the research was a lot of the competencies, particularly for project and program management, are very similar, but it's actually the context and the complexity within which you're working that makes a difference. And so we've gone along the lines of having a base framework, and then you can apply those competencies to the role that you're doing. And also the feedback that we had was that actually integrating a new framework, particularly into a corporate environment where people were using the first edition of the competence framework, would take time, possibly as long as 24 months in some organisations. So a lot of the work that we've been doing is not only looking at how the competence framework can be used by individuals, but also how the competence framework can be used by corporate organisations as well. So that's another strand of the development that's been moving forwards. And also you told us we need to make a number of changes to make it more effective. So what has actually changed? We've got the updated competence framework. There's a new rating scale that sits alongside that as well. Because one of the the big bits of the feedback that we had when we were doing the research was actually the 0 to 10 rating scale wasn't that helpful. It was useful to have a rating scale to give people an idea of where they're sat in terms of those competencies, but 0 to 10 was too much of a wide-ranging scale. So the new rating scale that sits alongside the competence framework is now a 1 to 5 scale. And that's based directly on the feedback that we've received from the individuals that have used the old edition of the competence framework, and also how they'd like us to develop moving forward. And there's also new guidance on complexity as well. In the first edition of the competence framework, there was a table at the back of that framework that allowed you to score the projects that you're working on in terms of complexity. Sitting alongside the new competence framework is some additional and some new complexity guidance, so to look at how you might categorise your projects, programmes or portfolios as being complex or non-complex, or of being a limited complexity. It's not a tick box exercise by any means, but it's just giving some guidance and some pointers as to how you might want to look at that complexity and some of the factors you might want to consider within there. So the new competence framework itself is streamlined and easier to use. The number of competencies is reduced from 47 to 27. And one of the questions we get asked quite regularly is how we managed to go from 47 competencies just on project management to just have 27 competencies that covers project, programme, portfolio and PMO management as well. And that's primarily in the way that we've addressed the content in the competence framework. Historically, the competence framework had a one-to-one relationship with the body of knowledge. Moving forward in the new edition of the competence framework, the approach we've taken is one of functional analysis, so looking at what needs to happen for projects, programmes, portfolios to be effective, and looking at the functions that need to be performed. As I was saying before, some of those functions are very similar across project and programme management in particular, but it's the context and the complexity within which you're working that's different. So it's not that we're having to repeat the competencies, it's just applying it to the different arenas. And what you'll find is when you look at the competence framework content, rather than referring to projects, programmes, portfolios or PMO roles or PMO functions, we actually refer to change initiatives. And that phrase of change initiative covers projects, programmes and portfolios. Okay. It can now be used for the disciplines that I've just outlined, and it is also cross-referenced to edition 1 of the competence framework and also the IPMA International Competence Baseline, and those mappings are available for you as well. So how do you access the new competence framework? The competence framework itself is available free of charge on the APM website for individual use. If you go to the APM website and click on the Project Management tab down at the bottom, where you see the red arrow on the screen at the moment, points to the new APM Competence Framework. If you click onto there, you'll be able to download the competence framework, the rating scale, and also a scoring system as well, and a score sheet that you can use, an assessment sheet that's there. We do ask you to register onto the APM website, so if you are already registered, then please do put in your username and password before you try and download the competence framework content. If you're not already registered, then please just click up on the right-hand side of the screen and you can register there to become registered on the website and access that content. Okay, so what will you see when you download the competence framework? Well, the first thing that will greet you will be a contents page which outlines the 27 competencies, and that's showing on the right hand side of the screen at the moment. There's only the first 17 on there, but I didn't want to put all 27 on the screen and make the writing too small. So you'll see the contents page and you'll see the page that it refers to, and you can click through onto each of those individual competencies. The competencies themselves are set out in a way where you have a definition of what the competence is. You then have some introductory notes which gives you a little bit more information around that competence and what that competence is referring to. And those introductory notes and the definition are aligned to the body of knowledge content. You'll see some words that are slightly different within there, but the concepts around them and the content that's there, they are aligned together. You then have a number of different performance indicators, some listed under application and some listed under knowledge. For those of you that have used the first edition of the competence framework, you'll notice that we've moved away from the term experience and put the term application in there as well. And again, that was based on feedback that we had from individuals who are using edition 1 of the competence framework that highlighted that you could have the experience, but you could have been doing it badly for a number of years. So we're now looking at the term application and knowledge that's there. Each of the performance indicators are written in an outcome-focused way, so it's easy to say whether or not you have or have not achieved them. And then you have the rating scale that sits alongside those competencies. The rating scale, as I said earlier, goes from 1 to 5, with 1 being aware and 5 being an expert, and all the different levels in between. So that's how the competencies are set out, and you should be able to read those pretty clearly as you log into the website and download that content. There is also a self-assessment form that's available, and this is just to give you sight of what that self-assessment form looks like. Again, all of the competencies are listed down on the left-hand side of the form, so when you download it, you'll have all of the competencies there. We're only showing the first 3 on this slide, so you can get the idea of what the form looks like, but please feel free to download it from the website so that you can have a look. So you have the competence number, you then have the competence itself, you then have your score for knowledge and application, and also an evidence summary to support your score as well. So rather than just saying, yes, I'm at this level, you've actually got an audit trail of why you think you're at that level. And that's important when we come on a little bit later to look at how you can use the competence framework and the benefits that you can derive from it. Okay, so moving on then to how to use the competence framework. The competence framework content is there for you to download. You can see all 27 competencies. So the best advice really is to review those competencies and decide which of those are relevant to your role. As I was saying before, we went for the approach of having one base competence framework content to include all of the competencies that relate to project, program, portfolio and PMO roles. So there will be some competencies on there that won't directly apply to you as a project manager or as a program manager, as a portfolio manager or somebody working within a PMO environment. So for example, you have asset allocation, which is one of the competencies that is designed specifically for portfolio roles. So I wouldn't necessarily expect a project or a program manager to be scoring themselves against that competence. But have a look at the competencies, read through them, decide the competencies that are relevant to your role. Once you've got that understanding of which competencies you want to score yourself against, the suggestion is then to read through the performance indicators for applications and score these holistically. So have a look down all of the application indicators and make a judgment as to whether you're at level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4 or level 5. When you have a look at the rating scale that's on the APM website, you'll see definitions of what is meant by each of those levels. So have a look at the performance indicators and give yourself a holistic score using that rating scale. But as you're going through that, then also highlight some of those specific performance indicators that you might want to develop, that you might score yourself a 4 on most of them, but you're only a 3 on one. So that would then bring your score down to the 3 overall, and that might be the area that you then want to highlight so that you can then develop over the coming months. And again, do the same for the performance indicators for knowledge, and again score those holistically, highlighting any of those areas you might want to develop moving forwards. The rating scale, as you'll see, also relates to the complexity and the environment in which the project's being run in. So have a look at those definitions on the scoring and the rating scale, and make sure that you're fully aware of those before you start scoring yourself holistically on the self-assessment form. It's also beneficial to ask someone to validate your scores, possibly a line manager or a colleague that you trust. What tends to happen when people self-assess, particularly if they're using a rating scale, they either overestimate their scores or underestimate their scores. So it's always really useful to get somebody to validate those scores to make sure that actually you're working from a baseline that actually reflects your knowledge and your application and your experiences there. Once those scores have been validated and you've got those areas that you've highlighted for development, they can really inform your CPD plan. So looking at the areas that you might want to develop through CPD over the coming year, but not just highlight those areas, but as you're developing your CPD, then really start recording what you got out of that development, how that's moved you forward. And when you're looking at your CPD plan, look at and think about where you might want to be future time in terms of your career in the next 12 months, in the next 18 months, or even longer term in sort of 5, 6, 7 years time. So you can start looking at the competencies you might need to develop, and then you can start looking for opportunities to develop those competencies. And that could be developed in a number of ways. So it could be in your day-to-day work. You might highlight a particular area using the competence framework that you really want to develop, and actually you can then discover an area at work where you could develop that. So it doesn't need to be, you don't need to be going out of your way to be doing anything in addition, but just taking those opportunities when you see them. And those opportunities are always easier to identify once you've identified what you want to develop personally, rather than just chasing after opportunities that might be there, that might not actually get you where you want to be. So it's always good to have that CPD plan in the background. So you have the opportunity, you might have the opportunity to develop through your day-to-day work. It might be that actually you identify somebody within your organisation who wants to, or who is really good at that competence, and you want to start having conversations with them and start to develop your understanding and knowledge that way. It could be by attending events. APM run a number of events throughout the year, through branch events and specific interest groups events. There might be events that run through your corporate organisation as well, or you become aware of. It could be through reading material. It could also be through qualifications. So particularly if you want to develop the knowledge areas within the competence framework, then you've got the APM Project Fundamentals qualification or the APM Project Management qualification. If you're looking at developing competencies around there, then there's the current practitioner qualification, and also looking towards RPP as well. So looking at your CPD plan, looking at where you want to be, and using the competence framework really to inform those areas of development. So you can actually have a planned and organised approach to your own personal development as well. There is more information on CPD on the APM website, so do follow that link through to the CPD information that's there. On those CPD pages you will also see a CPD log that you can use to start tracking and recording your CPD, and that also allows you the opportunity to record the evidence that comes out of that, and where you want to then develop moving forwards. So just because you've undertaken one activity that helps you develop on one competence area, that then might lead on to other areas as well. So in terms of assessing yourself against the competence framework, we'd advise to do that at least every 6 to 12 months to make sure that you're still on track with your CPD plan, that if you need to refresh what you're planning to do on CPD, or if opportunities have come up that take you in a different direction, just to making sure that your professional and personal development is in line with what you're able to do, and getting you where you want to be in your own personal development and in your own career. So what are the key benefits of the change of the competence framework? Well, it's a modern framework that can be used as it is or integrated into an organisation's competence framework. There are role profiles available in connection with the competence framework, but they are available for organisation use only at the moment, and that's part of a corporate member package. So if your organisation is interested in licensing the competence framework content and accessing those role profiles, then please do get in contact with the business development team at APM, and they'll be more than happy to help. In terms of individual use at the moment, it's the competence framework itself and the score, the self-assessment form that's there, along with a rating scale that people can use to inform their own personal development. With the competence framework, there are clearly defined competencies with easily measured outcome-focused performance indicators, so it is very easy to say, have I achieved this or haven't I achieved this? Or if I haven't achieved this as yet, then what do I need to do to then develop myself to be meeting those levels? It is the trusted professional body view. It is the competencies that as a professional body we're saying, actually, if you're working as a professional project program, portfolio or PMO professional, then you should actually be demonstrating these competencies at particular levels. It does provide an effective benchmarking tool moving forward. It enables project professionals to identify their strengths and development needs. So it gives you that baseline to then move forward from, and it also facilitates movements between the 4 project professional disciplines. So as we're saying before, there are competencies in there that relate specifically to program management or to portfolio management, but actually you can see those and you have sight of those if you're working in the project management arena, and you can see if you'd like to develop those competencies to then move into another project professional discipline. Or equally, if you're working in a completely different area of the business and you want to get involved in project, program, portfolio or PMO management, then you can see the competencies that you'd need to develop. Okay. So how does the competence framework support APM future plans? Well, it creates a platform for all of our future products and services, including a development pathway towards RPP. It underpins the structure and syllabus of the new qualification that's currently in development. So there's a direct link through from the competence framework to the structure and the syllabus for that qualification, which again strengthens that career journey and that development journey moving forwards. And it underpins CPD and the wider career development. So as I mentioned before about how it can inform CPD plans and how you can move forward individually as a project professional using the competence framework. It does underpin all of that CPD activity and also wider career development, so you can really get a sense of purpose of where you're moving towards and what you'd like to do in terms of developing your own career. Okay. If you want to find out more, we'll have a read through the website for more details. Like I say, the competence framework content is available under the project management tab on the website, so have a look at that content, have a read of it, get a really good feel for it, and the rating scale as well, so you can really get an understanding of what that content is and how that content can apply to you as an individual. We have a number of FAQs on the website as well, so read through those, have a review of those, because the majority of questions that you probably have regarding the competence framework will be covered by the FAQs that we have on the system. But if we haven't answered your question and you still want to find out more and how you can access the new framework, then please do email info@apm.org.uk and we'll be able to respond to your query. If you do have a query or an inquiry from an organisational point of view, then you can still use that address, or there are further addresses on the APM website as well to contact the business development team directly to access the framework under licence that can then be used throughout your organisation. So that's a possibility as well. I wanted to allow a lot of time for questions, so I do appreciate there are a lot of people logged into the system and logged into the webinar. So that's a brief overview of how the competence framework can be used to support your own individual development. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, first question we have is, will this second competence framework be incorporated into the RPP application process?
As it stands at the moment, the RPP competencies are available as a standalone standard for RPP. So the application process and the competencies that are needed for RPP are available on the RPP area of the website, and people can still apply and using that standard. We will be looking at how the new competence framework relates to RPP, but that's sort of future development. For the moment, the RPP standard remains exactly as it is.
Is there a list of competencies required for the RPP registration?
Yes, the RPP competencies are available on the under the RPP section of the APM website, and the competencies, the application process, and the evidence that you need to apply for RPP is all detailed on that section, either in the competencies themselves or in the candidate guidance notes that sit alongside that.
We have a few delegates that would just like to know what RPP is.
Okay. RPP is Registered Project Professional. It's a designation that candidates can apply for that shows that they are competent in managing complex projects, managing and leading others in that space as well. So it really is a professional designation that looks at your competence at managing projects, programs and portfolios, and leading and managing others aligned to the competencies that are set out in the standard.
What are the role profiles available through the competence framework and through corporate membership?
Okay. We have 14 role profiles that are available through through corporate membership and access to the competence framework and that the information that's available to corporate members. There are 4 project management role profiles, there are 3 program management role profiles, 3 portfolio management role profiles, and 4 PMO role profiles, and they are available under license through the corporate membership package.
Which competencies would you see are as directly relevant to a PMO type role?
There are a number of different competencies within the competence framework that would be relevant to a PMO role. It does depend on how the PMO has been organised within the organisation, and it does depend on the scope of the PMO role that you're doing. The PMO role profiles are available under licence. However, I would suggest as an individual you have a look at the competencies themselves and make the judgment as to what's relevant to you within your specific role.
Does APM have a current CPD log, or will one become available shortly?
There is a CPD log available on the APM website, and that allows you to record the areas of development that you want to be looking at, but also once you've undertaken that development, recording the evidence of how effective that development was and what changes that's made to you as a professional and how you actually undertake the role that you're doing.
Are the APM competencies still aligned to the IPMA competencies?
There is a mapping between the new competence framework and the IPMA International Competence Baseline, so you'll see how the two align to each other by looking at that mapping document, and that's available on the website.
What is the new qualification currently under development that was mentioned earlier in the presentation?
There's a new qualification that APM is developing as a route through to RPP, as a development route through to RPP, that is being made available later on this financial year, and it's directly aligned to the competence framework and the content that's within there.
Will role profiles be made available to individual members?
As it currently stands, the role profiles are available purely under licence to corporate organisations. However, the base content is available free of charge. So it's a move forward from where we were with edition 1 of the competence framework, where individuals had to buy the book. We have made the content freely available. However, the role profiles are only available currently under corporate licence.
Is there mapping between the levels and the qualifications suggested?
In terms of the mapping between the competence framework and the qualifications, I think if what comes out in terms of your self-assessment against the competence framework is you need to increase knowledge in particular areas, then I would have a look at the project fundamentals qualification or the project management qualification. Within the new qualification, that will be available when the qualification is launched.
Is there any particular change in the requirements of CPD due to this change?
No, there's no change to the requirements of CPD due to the change. There's an obligation on APM members to carry out 35 hours of CPD. That remains exactly the same. Where we see the new competence framework fitting in is to provide you with a really good solid baseline to look at the content of the development that you might want to make. Those 35 hours of CPD that you need to do needs to be project related, so it actually relates to what you're doing within the project management arena, and also needs to be reflective as well, so you can look at what you're doing and how that makes an impact to you. So there's no changes to the CPD log. It's always good to refresh yourself as to what the requirements are for CPD. If you are already an RPP holder, then it's the CPD, 35 hours of CPD is mandatory, so we'll be expecting you to do that as an APM member. There's an obligation to do it as demonstrating your professionalism and maintaining your professionalism within the arena of project management in its widest sense. So there's still the requirement of 35 hours, and we would see the competence framework as providing a really good solid baseline to look at what areas you need to develop.
What is the difference between chartered status and the registered project professional?
APM is currently put in an application to become a chartered body, and while that's ongoing, then APM wants to be a chartered body in everything that we do, so in all but name really. So registered project professional has been developed as a route through and a part of that journey towards chartered status.
Can self-assessment be completed by anyone within APM?
It doesn't just have to be used by APM members, it can be used more widely. It is freely available on the APM website. As long as you register before you download that content, then you can have access to it. It can also inform APM member applications if that's what people want to use it for. It doesn't have to be validated by anybody who's a member of APM, and I would suggest that you actually look at approaching a line manager or a trusted colleague to look at validating your scores in terms of the self-assessment form that's there.
Why are the role profiles only available to corporate members?
Okay. At the moment, they're only available to corporate members, and that's the decision that's been taken with regards to rolling out the competence framework content. By making the content freely available, at the moment, I was saying before, it is a step forward from the first edition of the competence framework, where the content had to be purchased. We are now making it freely available. However, the role profiles are just available under corporate license.
I'd like to print a copy to have it with my work. Will a PDF be available to download?
If you register on the APM website and you have a look at the content under the project management tab, then you can download the content and you can print off the competence framework from that PDF, so you can download it so it's there. There is also some sample role profiles on the website as well, so you can have a look and see what those role profiles look like, but only those samples are available with the content that's there on the website. Okay, so I think that's come to the end of the questions that have been sent through. So I hope you found that useful and understanding how you can use the competence framework and how you can use it to get the best benefit out of it. If you do have any other questions, then please do have a look on the website under the FAQs. If we haven't answered your questions there, then please do email in and we'll get a response out to you. And just a reminder that the webinar is being recorded and will be available on the YouTube channel tomorrow, and a link will also be sent around once that content is available on the YouTube channel. Thank you very much for listening.